Hi, I'm Jimmy, and today we're going to be talking about Smokey and the Bandit Part 3. Now, I'm sure some of you are probably thinking, great, Jimmy has chosen to start this new side series off with a salute to a good bad movie that he liked as a child. Wonderful. How groundbreaking. But there is so much more to this movie, believe me, and if you're a person who makes films or who edits films, this is going to be particularly interesting to you. I think. So, quick backstory real quick. 3 Smokey films. The first 2 were insanely successful. The first movie outgrossed Star Wars in a lot of areas the month it was released back in '77, and when it came time to do a third, Burt Reynolds was like, no thanks, and did Stroker Ace instead. So they went to Jackie Gleeson and they were like, Burt won't do it. And Gleeson was like, don't need him, I'll do it. Gleeson had made a habit of playing multiple characters on his variety show in the 50s, and also played Buford's relatives in the previous Bandit film. So with Burt out of the picture, the entire production was on Gleeson's shoulders. He would not only play Smokey, he would play the Bandit as well. And they actually did just that, apparently. To this date, no footage has surfaced of this other than the occasional picture and maybe a script with hardly any lines in it, since Gleeson did so much improv. And while some dispute this actually happened at all, the original trailer is like, not so fast.
Now, you all know I pursued that sucker through 20 states, 3,000 miles, and 2 movies. I finally figured out a way to trap him. I have put myself in his place. Also his boots, and his shirt, and his hat, and his coat, and his mustache. In short, I have succeeded in becoming my own worst enemy, the Bandit.
I mean, he says right there he's going to wear the boots, the hat, the mustache. I mean, what else could that mean? Not to mention this title card.
Smokey is the Bandit. Part 3.
Remember that line in Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey?
Smokey and the Bandit 3! Smokey is the Bandit!
Yeah, that's where that came from. So this was a terrible idea, obviously. At least according to the test audiences. And Gleeson was very embarrassed by the whole thing. Some say he bought all the footage from the studio just so no one would ever see it again. It was decided to bring back Jerry Reed in the story to pretend to be the Bandit, per an obvious rewrite, and shoot extra footage to patch over the Gleeson bits. Now this is where things get really interesting for me as someone who likes to edit, and why this movie is so fascinating. Watching the finished film and trying to decipher where the edits come into play. The first 20 minutes of the movie, I'm sure, would be pretty much the same. Big and Little Enos talk Buford out of retirement by promising him $250,000 if he and Junior can drive from Miami, Florida to Austin, Texas in like 24 hours with a giant fish on top of their car. No biggie. The first act is like a Roadrunner cartoon, with the Enoses trying to delay Buford with various traps until they decide they need some help. But this time, not from the Bandit.
There's only one man I know that's never let us down.
Watch that hostility. Would you be speaking?
Oh, I'm not talking about that egomaniac. I'm talking about the only one we can really trust, the snowman.
Notice how that line about calling in the snowman is off camera, an obvious ADR fix. This is where the Enoses originally would have called Gleeson's Bandit character, but now in reshoots they call Jerry Reed, who they're going to enlist to dress up as the Bandit to delay Buford even further. Notice how the footage of Reed and the footage of the Enoses don't really make any sense together.
Do I get to wear the hat, the shirt, huh? And drive the car. Now listen, I think you just got yourself a bandit.
It's like Jerry Reed is basically having a one-sided phone conversation where he actually has to tell us what they're saying on the other end because they didn't shoot it originally. He just keeps saying, I'm going to be the Bandit. I love it.
I'm gonna be the bandit. I'm gonna be the bandit. I love it. The bandit, the bandit. Wear the hat, drive the car. I love it. Give me the car.
Now, while it's impossible to know what the Gleeson Bandit scenes would have been like, the Snowman Bandit scenes are written to feel very familiar to the Reynolds scenes from the previous two films. They even have the snowman run across a damsel in distress, played by Colleen Camp, who is suddenly along for the ride because, of course, the bandit has to have a girl in the car, right? And thus begins Smokey and the Bandit on a cross-country game of keep-away as they both steal the fish back from each other on their way to the finish line. The genius thing about the reshoots is that considering the way these chase movies are usually put together in nature, our characters are never usually on screen together anyway. So it's fairly easy to just reshoot who's in the other car and nobody's the wiser. Even this water skiing scene is an easy fix. Just reshoot close-ups of Jerry Reed and you're golden. For me, almost as strange as the legend behind this movie is the film's actual ending. As Buford approaches to finally arrest the bandit, the snowman ducks down and pops back up, and magically, he's Burt Reynolds, in what I guess is a kind of dream sequence, maybe? Apparently, Burt filmed it as a favor to Gleeson. Even stranger is the cameo was featured in ads for the movie.
Jerry Reed, Jackie Gleeson, and guess who?
I'll be with my pants down.
He's in there for like a minute. Some stray thoughts that I had about the movie on this watch. Troublesome KKK humor, which was a thing in the 80s. Remember this scene from The Toy?
You look like an Eskimo pie, Grand Wizard. No, I got it. Al Joseph.
Also with Gleeson, by the way. There's a lot of bizarre sexual humor and actual nudity in this installment, which is weird considering that this is PG, but remember this was before the PG-13 rating, so it kind of checks out. Also, the funny thing about all the Bandit films is that when they show them on TV, they have to edit out half of Jackie Gleason's dialogue, and the guy they used to ADR him is obviously the same guy who was doing Fred Flintstone at the time. I think his name was Henry Corden.
Let me have a Diablo sandwich, a Dr. Pepper, and make it fast. I'm in a great big hurry. My fruity pebbles are gone. How fruitituous, Barney!
So on occasion, Jackie Gleason becomes Fred Flintstone. Which is really weird because, well, maybe we'll talk about that in a future one of these things. Also, my favorite line of the movie.
I sure wouldn't mind a romp in your melon patch.
Hopefully, one day footage of the Gleeson as Bandit edit will surface. But until then, you keep your ears on, because I got my pedal to the middle and I'm 10-10 on the side. Come back.
I'm gonna be the bandit. I love it. The bandit, the bandit.